Today on the Basketball Manitoba podcast, we are joined by Ross Wedlake. Ross has been involved in basketball for over 40 years as a player, coach, and official. He is the current president of Basketball Manitoba and the chair of the Manitoba Basketball Hall of Fame and Museum. He played at the University of Manitoba, where he was a conference all-star 3 times, an all-Canadian once, and twice team MVP. In 1972, he was a member of the Canadian national team. He was a member of the St. Andrews Super Saints that won Canadian Senior Men's Championships in 1972, 75, and 76. He coached the Varsity Boys basketball program at Kildonan-East for 20 years and worked as an assistant with the University of Winnipeg Wesmen for 12 years. Ross is a member of the Basketball Manitoba Hall of Fame class of 1996. And now, here's my discussion with Ross Wedlake. Okay, we are recording and are live on the Basketball Manitoba podcast. And today we have Ross Wedlake. Ross, thank you so much for joining us.
You're welcome. Good to be here, Darcy. Always good to talk to you and always good to talk about basketball, especially basketball in Manitoba.
Absolutely. I would say you're somewhat of an ambassador for basketball in Manitoba. So I think we have the right person. Ross, I wanted to kind of start, when my first memory of you, I mean, obviously we've interacted a ton, when I worked in the office, so I would see you all the time. But before that, my first memory of you was back when I was coaching high school basketball, and I was actually an assistant coach with Gordon Bell, and you would referee our games, and you referee a few of our games. And at the time, I had no idea who you were. I knew you were related to Adam, and I knew you were related to Bill. But the thing that I didn't know is, that you were pretty much a Basketball Manitoba legend at the time. But when you're young and you're new, you have no idea who's who. Like, you can obviously tell you played basketball. I had no idea. I just knew you were related to the Wedlakes and knew who Adam was through Basketball Manitoba. But that's my first memory of you. So I was curious if, you could tell me what your first memory of the game of basketball was.
The game of basketball? Well, that's a long way ago. Okay, I really didn't start playing basketball officially till the first team I played on was when I was in grade 11.
Really?
I never played basketball before then. I fooled around a bit with it and all that. And we used to play at the outdoor court at Luxton School, which is in the north end of Winnipeg, very close to where I grew up. And we've played around with it. And to be honest with you, the people who I played with, they liked it a lot more than I did. And there was only 3 of them, and they often recruited me to be the 4th. It wasn't necessarily something I wanted to do, but they needed to play 2-on-2. And if you can remember, people might remember the late Irv Hannock. He was one of the 4 of us, and he was always the best at everything. He was the best athlete no matter what sport we played. So my job was to be on Irv's team. And we played against my brother and Ken Kelch. And all I did was that if I happened to get the ball, which was seldom, I just threw it back to Irv. So that was my role. But when I got to grade 11 at St. John's High School, I never played in, we called it freshman or junior varsity. Yep. It was still called freshman in those days. I never played freshman. And I went to grade 11, and my brother really encouraged me to try out. And the coach of St. John's is a name that anybody who's old will remember. His name was Russ Pastic. He was a legend at St. John's. He was about 5'4", and yet I was so afraid of him. He ruled with an iron hand, as they say. And I really believe that when I was in grade 11, I grew a lot between grade 10 and 11. When I was in grade 10, I was maybe 5'10", and when I into grade 11, I was 6'4".
Wow.
Well, I really grew a lot, and you can guess that my coordination was challenged, to say the least. It still is, even though I'm old now. But I really believe that the main reason that Mr. Pastic kept me on the team was because my brother was probably the best player. Mm-hmm. He was repeating grade 12. And I think he thought if he cut me, my brother might be mad and quit. But I made the team, but in the grade 11 year, I played in 1 game.
Wow.
That was it. I said, as a matter of fact, I remember I don't know how many people were on the team, but let's say there were 12. I would assume somewhere in that area. And there were only 11 warm-up jackets, and I was the guy that didn't get one. So I knew my place on the team was quite clearly. So I really didn't play much at all, but I enjoyed it. I hid on the bench, and I guess I got better. And when I got into grade 12, there were only two of us in grade 12. There was Jaime Fox, who's still probably my best friend, and myself. And we knew we had to be good because St. John's was always good. And we made it to the provincial final in grade 12.
Wow. And I'm sure you played a lot.
The same team that we had beaten for the city championship 2 in a row a week before. So I obviously improved. And then I went from there to the University of Manitoba, and I made the Bisons in my first year. And I actually started in my first year, but that doesn't mean that I was that good. We were that bad. So I went from, in 5 years, in my first year, we won 1 game and lost 19.
Wow.
And it was our last game of the year we won. So we went into that game 0-19, and we won our last game. But in my last year, we lost in the national championship game.
Wow.
So it was quite a journey from little to a lot.
I was going to say in 7 years,
I think, and worked hard at it.
Well, that's a 7-year, I mean, give or take a couple of year turnaround, right? You went from barely playing on, in your first, I guess your first year of organized basketball to 7 years later, putting together quite the resume. And so you're telling me, Ross, that you got involved with the game just because your friends dragged you out, essentially.
Mainly, yes, because we played every sport known to man, and one of them happened to be basketball once in a while. And I have to admit, it wasn't my favorite, but I played anyways because we all played everything.
Yeah, exactly.
And every once in a while, basketball was the game of choice, and I was dragged into it. But it wasn't, as I said, but the Luxton court is still there. It's still a very special place to me. And I will say and put it on record that I have in my wishes to my children that when I die, part of my ashes are going to be scattered on the Luxton outdoor court, because that's where I learned how to play.
Wow. No and that's where your journey started. That's where the journey started.
Exactly. Yeah. It was a great place and still is. I drive my bike by there every day. I fix the nets on the rims regularly and clean it up. And it's still a sacred place to me.
That's special. And I think, obviously we're going to get more into this, further on in the conversation, but I mean, I think legacy is very important to you. It's something that you've, anytime I've interacted with you, you always have great stories, and obviously the Hall of Fame is a big part of what you do. But, as basketball players, as people, we all have mentors kind of like as we go through our life, especially when we're young. And I would say even when we get older, we maybe some of our mentors are even, they don't even necessarily have to be older people, but I'm sure you've had some key people in your life with regards to basketball. And so maybe you could talk about some of your early mentors and some of the lessons they taught you that you kind of passed on to the youth throughout your years with basketball.
Sure. And it's so true about, people affecting you. I have to say, even though he was not what would be considered a good coach, and I didn't know that at the time because I didn't know how much I didn't know until I left high school. But he did affect me. He was a mentor, because if there was one thing Mr. Pastic taught me, he taught me that the rebounding was such an important part of the game. And he implied that you don't have to do anything else. And I learned that. I learned how to tap the ball offensively, like tap-ins. I learned how to, as he used to say, if you get one offensive rebound a quarter and put it back in, that's 8 points. Yeah. Right away. And and that was my game. Like, if rebounding was not a part of the game of basketball, I would never have played. And that was one thing he did teach me, was not how to rebound, but how important rebounding was. And then when I went on to university, in my second year at the university, we had a very special man coach us just for 1 year. His name was Darwin Samodiak. And the interesting story behind him was, I told you that we won our last game in my first year, and he happened to be on that team. He
Oh,
played
really?
for the University of Alberta his
Oh,
last
okay.
year, and we beat them in our last game. And the next year he was our coach. But he only coached for 1 year. But he was a truly special individual in that he just brought such class to the game. And you really, one of those people, and you've seen them too, Darcy, people who you really want to work hard for, that for whatever reasons inspire you to give your best. And they're just, just super people. And he lives in London, Ontario now. He worked for a long time at University of Western Ontario as a football coach and as the athletic director. And I've met him there a few times because my son lives in that area. And he's still a wonderful, wonderful person. So I'd have to mention him. And then for the last 3 years of my college career, we had a guy named Jack Lewis, who has since passed too, who again was not a great technical coach, in terms of the X's and O's and his knowledge of the game, but just was a great people person and got the best out of you. And Jack was somebody who influenced me tremendously, not just in basketball, but in my life. He instilled confidence in you. You know what I mean? He made me feel that I was a better player than I probably was. You know what I mean? And that's hard to do as a coach. And he was a great influence on me. And then I have to admit that I was lucky enough one summer in 72 to play on Canada's national basketball team. And that was the first year that Jack Donahue coached in Canada. And if anybody who's followed Canada basketball knows, Jack Donahue is a real legend.
Yeah,
and what just an outstanding individual. What a great person he was. And how much I enjoyed that summer playing with the national team. And I emphasize the word how lucky I was, because I was not the star of the team. I was on the team and I was so happy to be there. It was something I always wanted to do. I did it for the one summer and that was all I really wanted to do. And I was happy to walk away. And I'm sure if I'd have tried out the next summer, I wouldn't have made it. You know what I mean? The reality was that they were better than me. And but I had that opportunity, and to work with Jack, it was wonderful. So and then I have to admit, just the last thing I'll say, and I'm sure you'll agree too, a big influence on anybody who plays basketball, or I guess any team sport, I only know basketball, are your teammates.
Yes.
Yes.
I've
had so many great teammates. I've been so lucky, and I still have. They're teammates for life, as I've said.
Yep.
They're my best friends, and I see them, and sometimes I don't see them all that often, but it's like you never left. You know what I mean? And these people, again, it's a team sport, and the influences you get from your teammates are immeasurable.
No, that's well said. I mean, again, as you were saying that, I'm thinking about some of my friends that I still have today that I played basketball with. And those connections that are made, you're absolutely right about that. And I think I think that's something where, I mean, you can say this about a lot of sports, and there's no doubt about that. But I always say this every time I talk about basketball. There's a certain basketball. There's a reason why the saying, ball is life is a real thing, because a lot of people who fall in love with the game, they're just so passionate about it. And yes, you can be passionate about a lot of different sports, but I've never heard, football is life or soccer is life or tennis. I haven't heard those, but I've heard ball is life. I've seen it on shirts. I've seen people kind of completely embrace that lifestyle. And I think there's a certain, basketball is special because you get to do these things on an individual level that are very important to team success, but you also get to do that with a team. So it's just a special sport in that regard. Yeah. So I definitely feel the same sentiment as you when you start talking about your mentors and people that you're still friends with and teammates. Now you mentioned obviously a little bit about your playing career, playing at University of Manitoba. You were a standout player. You won conference awards, all Canadian. You were team MVP. You said you played on the Canadian national team. So you have tons of, accolades on paper, and obviously tons of great memories. And you've obviously, like you said, met some great people along the way. But there's something that you and I talked about, and I'm just going to cue you on it. I'm actually very curious to see what you say. But it was a conversation you and I had in the office here, and you were telling me about salt tablets and and steak and pop and things like that. So do you remember that conversation? If you do, can you maybe?
I'm surprised you do.
Ross, I'll never forget it. I've told so many people. So I actually want to hear more about that.
I think when it came up, it was about the way things used to be.
Yes.
And how that's changed. And
exactly.
Throughout my 5 years at the University of Manitoba, and I know I'm old, but I'm not ancient. Like it's long ago, but not forever ago, I don't think.
For sure.
Anyways, it was what we said, like when it comes to water, like you go to a basketball game now, and every kid is expected to and has his or her own water bottle.
Absolutely.
And it's at halftime, at timeouts, on the bench, wherever, we're encouraged, and we should be hydrate. And it's everywhere. Exactly. And that's great. But when I played, as I think I told you, not only did they not have water on the bench, they wouldn't allow us to drink it. Because they said, whoever they was, I don't know. And I wasn't smart enough to question any of it. I just did whatever I was told. They said it would give us cramps if we drank water during, playing.
Oh, man.
You could drink it after maybe, but not during. So we didn't drink water ever. So it makes you laugh now, but compared to what we see. And the other part about the salt tablets is they used to give us regularly, and I don't know, I'm not saying how often, but at least 2 or 3 times a week, this big, and it was a big pill, a salt tablet.
Yeah.
I remember I used to break mine in half because it was hard to swallow as one.
Yeah.
Because they felt again that we weren't getting enough salt in our, because we were sweating so much.
Yeah.
This would replace the salt. But as we know today, most of us, probably including you and I, have way too much salt in our diets.
Exactly.
But they were giving us more.
and at the same time, don't drink water.
No, yeah. So and then the other thing, like pregame meals, nowadays, of course, if there is a good pregame meal 2 or 3 hours before a competition, it's always the pasta.
Yeah.
And the carbs, the easily digestible, the energy, the quick energy and all that. And it makes sense scientifically. And that's what most people are doing. When we played, it was always a steak and a baked potato.
Mm-hmm.
And that was maybe 2 hours, 3 hours before the game too. But I don't know what, and I ate it because it was free.
Yeah.
And I wasn't smart enough to think of anything else. But so here we were 3 hours later running around in the gym, playing a game with this big hunk of meat still sitting in our gut. Like, it's not like steak's bad for you, but it takes a while longer to digest.
Exactly.
Yeah. So but again, I think the thinking was, if there was thinking, that there was meat, and we're men, and men need meat. All this kind of crap, I don't know. Like I should ask someday. Like there was a Bison women's team, and in fact they were called the Bisonettes.
Really?
Yes, they weren't. That was they were their. We were the Bisons, and they were the Bisonettes.
Interesting.
I would like to ask. I should when I see some of them. Like, what did they have for a pregame meal?
Maybe it was completely different.
Yeah, we always had steak and baked potatoes, sour cream, all that, and I liked it. But looking back at it, they were no water, salt tablets, and a steak. They were killing us.
So, and then I think I remember. Correct me if I'm wrong here. After the game,
yes.
You said there is like pop or
water again, but they would bring in the Cokes or Pepsis.
Right.
And that I drank it because I liked it, and I drank too much
of course. Of course.
But again, it's a diuretic, and if anything, it makes you pee more.
Exactly.
So it's not. So
wow.
I don't know who the nutritionist was or the trainer, but the thinking has changed drastically.
Absolutely. Maybe that was just your coach. He said, this is what I do. So we're going to continue to do that.
And as I said, I never questioned or doubted it at all. I put anything they gave me, I put it in I remember talking about the salt tablets in my first year when we were 1-19. Obviously, it was a struggle, and I don't think I opened my mouth much that year. I was still like a deer in the headlights, trying to survive basically. And our coach, his name was Lloyd Hishka. He only coached for the 1 year. In one of the games at halftime, or maybe it was the end of the game, I forget. But he was so mad at us. He took the big bottle or can of salt tablets and threw it against the wall, and the salt tablets went everywhere. It was like confetti in the room, in the locker room.
Wow.
I should tell you, Darcy, this is a great thing too. If Rick Watts ever listens to this, he loves this story. That in my first year at the University of Manitoba, as I said, we were 1-19. So we played 20 games, right? Now, I had in my first year 96 fouls recorded. Okay. So if you do the math, a maximum that I could have had would have been 100. So I had 96. So I almost had a perfect play because I fouled out of most games. Yeah. And it was mainly because in high school with Mr. Pastic, we played zone. We were very deliberate. Yep. We slowed other teams down, and there was no shot clock, and we lulled them to sleep basically. And all I did was stand in the middle of the zone and wave at anybody that came around. Yep. And when I got to university, they said, "Okay, now Wedlake, you watch so and so, number so and so," and I didn't even know what that meant. You know what I mean? We never played man to man ever. Yeah, yeah. So it was a challenge for me, and obviously I met the challenge by fouling a lot.
A little bit of an adjustment period.
Yes, it was a tremendous adjustment. That's what I said. I was just overwhelmed by university and the competition, but I was lucky enough. As I said, it wasn't that I was that good. It was like how many guys that started in their first year? Not many, and it helped me a tremendous amount because I learned so many good lessons that first year that carried me on in my career.
Absolutely. So, quick question. So you played 20 games back then in your first year there. Was it GPAC at the time?
It was Canada West. I don't know. What did they call it? No. What was it called? It was all Western Canada anyways.
Okay. So
from Manitoba to British Columbia.
Okay.
And so only one representative came out of that. So it was very competitive. Wow. So when we won the West in my last year, as I said, and then ended up losing in the national final. We were the only representative that came out of the Manitoba, Saskatchewan, Alberta, British Columbia.
Wow.
It was competitive, very hard to come out.
No kidding. Yeah. Wow, that's tough. Yeah, I was wondering because I know there, obviously they changed the conference, alignment so much, and they've gone from, the GPAC days, and then obviously you played in GPAC, you play obviously other provinces. Now it's more of a balanced schedule, and there's more teams. So I'm always curious about that because I know in talking to some people, they say, hey, we played, Brandon 4 times, we played Winnipeg 4 times, was it like that as well for you, where you played most of the closer teams more, and then the
not really? I think we played everybody home and home twice.
Okay. That makes sense.
It was Manitoba, Winnipeg, Brandon. Only Brandon in my last 2 years.
Okay.
And then Regina, Saskatchewan, Lethbridge, Calgary, Alberta, Victoria, UBC.
That makes sense.
I remember what it was called. It was the WCIAA, the Western Canada Intercollegiate Athletic Association.
There we go. Okay.
I have to tell you when I mentioned Brandon, in Brandon's just my last year was the first year they played in the CIA, or what was it called then? The CAAU. Yeah. And so they were new and they weren't very good, as you could guess. And we were pretty good. And when we played them at home, we beat them badly. And it was not much of a game. We went to Brandon to play them. And I don't know if you've ever heard or know of that game, but it goes down. A lot of people say they were there, but I don't know how many.
Yes, I've heard about this.
You've heard about
please,
it. Well,
please,
they held the ball.
Please share.
They held the ball on us. That was Gary Howard who coached them then. And Bill Moody, if you know Bill Moody, he was on the Brandon Bobcat team. And they held the ball on us. So the final score of the game was University of Manitoba Bisons 14, Brandon University Bobcats 13. I have to tell you how it ended. They held the ball in the first half, and we chased them a bit.
Yeah.
We tried to force the play a bit, but at halftime we were down 1. So this was the plan at halftime, and I think Jack Lewis, it was a good plan on paper, like a lot of things are. The plan was that if we win the tip, which we probably would because we were much bigger than they were, if we win the tip and score, that'll put us up 1.
Mm-hmm.
And we did win the tip and score, so we were now up 1 point. So then the plan was just let them stand there. So we stood for 19 minutes, and they stood for 19 minutes and passed around a little bit, and we just stood there like this for 19 minutes and waited until the last minute. And then the plan was that in the last minute, we would foul Jan Kreutzer, who is now passed. He played at Dakota and Glenlawn and was a good player, but we didn't think he could shoot free throws, obviously. The plan was to foul Jan Kreutzer. And in those days, the first foul was just a 1 shot.
Yes, yes.
So he would only be able to tie it. And then we would get the last shot to win. Because we would foul him with maybe 30 seconds left.
Yep.
We would have ample time to get a decent shot at the other end. Sounded like a plan at the time. So everything went according. We won the tap. We scored. We stood there and watched them for 19 minutes. And then at about 2 minutes, Lewis told us to start doing jumping jacks and exercises to get ready. And we were doing them on the floor while they stood with the ball. So at 30 seconds left or whatever, we fouled Kreutzer because he had the ball. Okay, he goes to the line for 1 shot only. The best he can do is tie. Okay, he shoots the shot, and I'm going to mention a name, and he missed it.
Okay,
but I was on one side of the lane, and Bob Town was on the other side of the lane. Bob Town obviously didn't block out. What was his name? He was a very good player. I'll remember it in a minute. Didn't block out somebody on his side. That guy got the rebound, went up to shoot, and Town fouled him.
Oh my goodness.
He had 2 shots. And he made both. So now we were down 1 with about maybe 20 seconds. I don't remember exactly left. We came down. Lewis didn't call timeout, which I give him credit because he had confidence in us.
Yep.
And Angus Burr, who maybe you've heard that name, hit a shot, not a tough shot, but hit a decent shot almost at the buzzer, and we won by 1, 14-13.
Wow.
I remember the Brandon player, Dave Bauman.
Okay.
A very good player. His son ended up playing football for the Tiger Cats.
Okay.
He's a great guy, and he was a great player, but Bob didn't lock him out.
Wow. Well, that's just a wild story. And I remember, I remember the situation. I forgot that you told me the story. Yeah. And just that shows you how much the shot clock has changed the game. Because you can't do that now. Today. No, it would never happen. You guys would have, beat them by 25-30, and that would have been the game.
Yeah.
And
the thing I remember most about it is we were back at the hotel by about 9 o'clock because the game ended so fast.
Yeah, I guess so, right? No fouls, nothing. Wow. It's funny you mentioned Bob Town, and I've seen video. I played with him when he was much older, when I was much younger. The one thing I do know about him is that he's a leaper. He can jump, and typically jumping guys aren't good at boxing out. So, you tell me that story, I'm not surprised. He probably just went to go out jump the guy, mistimed it or something, and we go.
Bob was and still is a great athlete, and he's a great friend of mine still. One of the best athletes I ever played. He could have been
unbelievable.
Anything. He could have been when he tried out in my second year, he played at Churchill and was really not a great high school player. So we really didn't know him. But when he tried out that year with Darwin Samodiak, we hated him because he ran and he won all the races and he made us look bad.
I can imagine. I remember Bob, I have no idea how old he was. I just know he was older and I was younger when he was principal at where was it? No,
Nelson Mack.
Yes, and he would open up the gym and we'd play. And I mean, again, he's definitely old. He was much older than I am right now. I promise you that. And he could still jump and do all this stuff. And I couldn't believe it. I mean, obviously he has sons that are my age and they would be out playing as well. And he was just as athletic as them. And he had to have been in his 50s.
Yeah.
Easily. Small. Yeah. Unbelievable.
He didn't get hurt in those games, eh? Because he used to always get hurt.
Yeah, I bet. Right. So you after, you played university. I mean, you obviously went under coach and whatnot, but I kind of wanted to ask you about senior men's. Because I know you played senior men's and senior men's, if I say that to anyone listening now, they say, okay, yeah, I'm sure he played senior men's. Who wouldn't have played senior men's? But senior men's is not what it once was. So if you had to explain senior men's to someone, a younger person nowadays, what would you tell them?
Well, first of all, I would tell them how lucky I was, because when I graduated from university and I still wanted to play at a competitive level. And as you said, senior men's was different then than it is today. Now it's kind of just a recreation league more so. But there was a national championship for senior men's every year. We hosted it here twice that I can remember. And it gave us reasons to keep playing. And we used to practice 3 times a week at the old deaf school, which is now the Canadian Mennonite University.
Yes.
The gym used to be where the parking lot is out the back. And we could get that gym quite regularly. And we used to practice there regularly. And we would play the universities, both Winnipeg, Manitoba, and Brandon regularly. We went down to the States to scrimmage against UND, NDSU, and any senior teams that were down there. We were really very serious and stayed playing competitively because we wanted to be ready to play in this senior national tournament. And it was a big deal. Now, they don't have that today, of course. And it's too bad because, as I said, when I came out of university, I still wanted to play. And I didn't want to just, play around in a rec league once a week. Yeah. I still want, and we did. The only problem with all that was I was coaching then too. So often I would go from coaching to playing or playing to coaching or vice versa, whatever. And you're very busy, but it was well worth it. I feel very lucky that I was able to play competitively much longer than, say, people are today. Like the only way you can really do that now is if you maybe find a pro contract.
Yes.
And go overseas or even in that new Canadian league if you get attached to it. But that was I wasn't going to do that. But I played for a team called St. Andrew's Super Saints, and in my many years with them, we won the national championship 3 years. It should be noted too that from about 1970 to 1985, I'll say 84. Winnipeg senior men's teams, both St. Andrews, we won it 3 times, and Nicollet Inn, who had players like Martin Riley, Rick Watts, Daryl Rumsey, ex-Bisons, they won it 3 times too. So we won the national championship 6 times in about a 10-year period. Manitoba did. And that was a big deal. Like senior basketball was, when we played the universities, we would usually beat them.
Yes, absolutely.
Not always, but usually. And it was a big deal. And as I said, it gave us a reason to keep practicing, to stay competitive. We had a coach, we had practices, and we were, focused on playing in this national tournament. But that doesn't exist anymore.
Yeah, well, I remember when I first found out how serious it was. I remember I used to hear people talking about, you mentioned, your team and Nicollet. And then I saw on TV, as being part of the Hall of Fame, people bring in stuff all the time. And Adam in the office here at Basketball Manitoba was putting a old VHS or whatever it was, tape, and he was transferring it to digital format. And it was a game. It was a senior men's game. And this was a full broadcast. Like this wasn't like, this was big time. It was, hey, we're here at I don't remember. I don't know if it was here local, but it was either your team or another Manitoba team. And it was a big thing. It was big time. They had the pregame show. It was a whole thing. I don't know if it was on CBC. But it was a national broadcast. It was big time. And I was shocked. I didn't know that at the time. And it's like come to find out how big it was.
Yeah. And you wouldn't see that today, of course.
No. No.
But yeah, as I said, I feel very lucky in that I was played at a time where there was still that opportunity. And I'd like that to be today for people graduating from university, but the costs of things have become such that
yes,
any money that Canada Basketball has, they try to invest it not only in the national teams, but in the grassroots, and spending money on older men or older women doesn't make a lot of sense.
No, it really doesn't.
I agree with it, but it's unfortunate.
Absolutely. Now, Ross, you mentioned you played while you were playing, you were actually coaching. And I know you also coached as an assistant, university levels. You did win a championship with Kildonan-East. So I know you've coached for a long time. You even actually, I believe at Kildonan-East, I think Adam tells me the story, how you were his coach.
I was
at KE, and I think he was in the 12th grade during the championship. I'm not quite sure, but 11th. Okay. So I say all that just to actually cue you on a question I have. And I'm actually curious, what is your most memorable coaching moment? It can be anything. It doesn't have to be that championship, but something that stands out for you.
I've told this story, and it means something to me. It may not mean anything to you or to anybody else, but, obviously winning a provincial championship, and we won numerous conference championships and tournaments, and that was great. I wish we'd have won them all, but we didn't. But there's one that I'll never forget, and it's got nothing to do with winning. There was one year at Kildonan-East, like we were pretty ordinary. Like we were small, but we were slow, And, I knew going into the year that we weren't going to have a success. That's because, you just don't have the talent.
Yes.
We were going to be okay, but we're not going to win anything. But anyways, there was this one kid on the team who is if I had to pick my all-time team, I'd pick him first. And yet he couldn't play. He was awful. Like he was okay defensively because he worked so hard.
Yes.
He gave maximum effort defensively, but he couldn't score. Like you could lock him in a gym by himself and he couldn't score double figures. Like he struggled putting the ball in the hoop, to say the least. And I would work with him individually a lot because he was so keen. And sometimes you hear like there was too much thought for him. He thought about his shot too much. It was always like, I do this more elbow, and I would just shoot it. I used to get into the muscle memory, but I never was able to help him that much. But he was a super kid. Did anything for you. He worked as harder than any kid I've ever had in my life. Had the best attitude. You've seen kids like this.
Yep, absolutely.
You love them to death.
Absolutely.
But anyway, so we play this year with him, and he's our captain. And he starts for us. That shows you how bad we were. So we play the year, and at the end of the year, we came fourth in our conference.
Okay.
And it shows you, and there was 8 teams, so I don't know how we beat 4. They must have been really bad. But anyways, so the semifinals were like often first place fourth, second place third. Yep. So we had to play the first place team, who were undefeated. They had gone the whole year undefeated and had drilled us twice during the year. We had to play them in a 1-game semifinal game and at their place. Now, I didn't say to the kids, hey, we're going to lose this game, but they weren't stupid. They knew we were in tough here. So we prepared for it. We put in some new stuff and tried to give a bit of a different look. So we go to play the game at their place. And my memory, maybe numbers may not be exactly true, but at halftime, we were down 8 points. This was great.
Yeah.
Like if you'd asked me, are you going to be down 8 points? There's no way. And so I was really upbeat at halftime, and we were still in this. And now they may have been taking us for granted.
Yes.
I don't know, but it doesn't matter. We were in this game, and we had a chance still. And at the 3 quarters, I think we were maybe down 10. So we're going into the last quarter. We still had a shot at this thing.
Yeah.
We were playing as well as we had ever had. So it was good. But as the 4th quarter went on, you could see it was slipping away on us. Mm-hmm. We were down 12, 14, 16. This wasn't going to happen. But anyways, this kid, the best kid I've ever coached, falls out of the game. So he comes over, and I'm going to choke up when I tell this story, but it still affects me. He comes over to the bench, and I say to him, way to go, what coaches say, good effort or whatever. I don't know what I said exactly. He goes and sits down. I put somebody else in, and the game is going on, and I'm still coaching because we're not going to win this, but hey, let's make it as good as we can. I look down on the bench, and he's sitting there, and he's crying. And these big tears are rolling down his cheeks. I can't let him just sit there. I got to say something to him. So I go down, and he's sitting on the bench, and I'm standing over him. And I said something like, we gave it our best. We got nothing to be ashamed of, whatever, cliche stuff, but true. Yeah. And I was very sincere, and I wanted him to consider that. Well, he had his head down, and he looked down, his big white eyes looking at me with tears streaming down his cheek. And he looked me right in the eye, and he says, yeah, but I let you down, he says. He let me down. This is a kid who was never going to play on another team in his life. Nobody would have him. And he's worried about me. I didn't know what to say to him.
Yeah.
I said, Neville, you've never let me down. I said, ever. And that's the kind of thing you remember, because it's people. You know what I mean? And winning things is nice, and getting banners and trophies and all that, great. But you remember the people that you formed special relationships with. And I still see him. I have lunch with him, and he's not a boy anymore. He's got his own family. He's still a sweetheart.
Of course.
Still a sweetheart. I will say to him, I didn't say this then, but he said, whenever I have lunch with him, he always says, what do you say about, what do you think about me? And he likes when I say this. And I said, Neville, I said, you did a great service to your race, because there's a lot of people out there who still have the stereotype that all Black people are good basketball players. You did your best to break that stereotype down. Now, I never said that when he was playing.
Of course not.
But I say it to him now, and he loves it.
Oh, man. I had no idea where you were going with that.
Kid. And there's other ones too, and I'm sure you've worked with kids too.
Oh, like man,
that you remember that Absolutely. I'll never forget.
Absolutely, that's a great story. Like that's classic. Ross Wedlake right there. You told a great story. You made me smile. You made me get emotional. It touched on everything there. That's how you tell a good story.
I still choke up anytime I tell that story.
Well, it was obviously a very significant moment. Now, would you say that he's also your most memorable player as well?
Memorable, yes. Definitely not the best.
Well, yeah. Well, that's clear.
But definitely most memorable. I had others too that are special, and I still see and have lunch with, and who are good friends now. But he might be just because he worked so hard, and yet he never really got much in return. I know I coached a lot of kids who worked really hard and became very good players.
Yeah, exactly.
And ended up being recognized as good players, but he didn't.
Yeah.
He never won any awards or anything like that.
It's interesting.
But he won awards when I gave them out at the end of the year, because he was always outstanding player, or whatever I call it, most inspirational, or whatever it was. He was a pleasure to coach.
So Ross, so then who would you say, again, if we're going to go down to the talent side, who was the most talented player you've ever coached?
I think the most was Elliot Unger. And if I did anything for Elliot, I probably held him back.
Oh, why do you say that?
Well, I don't know. I probably should have. I don't know whether he'd agree or not. I don't know. But he became a much better player after, which he should. But we didn't have a lot other than him. You know what I mean? And he had to fight off a lot of double and triple teams.
Yep.
But he was great. He was again, probably the best thing maybe I did for Elliot was not try to coach him too much, because we all know that sometimes in coaching you can screw it up with good talent just as much as you can, But what I always tried to do with the very good players like Elliot, and I had others too who went on to play university and that, is don't treat them any differently. Like I was as hard on him as I was on anybody else, and my expectations maybe were higher, and they should be.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And he was not treated specially, and I hope Elliot would agree with that. And that probably helped him become a better player, because I didn't let him sit out. You know, if he wasn't, I expected him to do all the dirty work too that everybody else was doing. And that's what teams are all about. There shouldn't be any hierarchy of, even though we know some people are better players than others, you know, this is a team and we're in this together and we're all going to do whatever we have to do together. And so he was definitely the best, because he was a big kid. He was an athlete too. And he was a really great kid to coach too, because he pushed himself hard and wanted to get better and did become better, and had a really good university career too. Chris Chartier was another one that I coached. He was on that team when we won the provincial championship. And again, a great kid, not as good an athlete as Elliot, but a big kid. But again, learned things that I learned when I played, and that's that. And I try to communicate that to young players now, if I ever have the opportunity. You don't have to do everything. Like that's the great thing about basketball. You can find a skill and you can work at it really hard and be a major contributor to a team just by doing, like with me, it was rebounding.
Exactly.
Like I learned how to rebound the ball. And like I played with a guy named Terry Ball, who's in the Basketball Hall of Fame. And I've heard people say it must have been great to play with Terry Ball. And the reason it was great was because there was lots of misses up there. Because Terry never made a shot that he didn't like. You know what I mean? He was shooting it as soon as he got in the gym. Absolutely. And I knew that. So anytime Terry shot it, I was going after it. And a lot went in, but a lot missed too.
Absolutely.
And,
absolutely.
You know, and that was what Chris did too. He learned, you know, to only do certain things. And that's what I think good teams are, is that I see kids today who think everybody has to shoot the 3-pointer. Everybody has to be a ball handler. Everybody has to do be able to do that. Well, it's nice if you can, but play within yourself. Play, you know, do what you can do to help this team. And sometimes you've seen, and I've seen, that kids try to do too much.
Yes.
And it ends up hurting the team.
Yeah.
You know. So
and it hurts them as well. I mean, they're not winning from that. They're suffering as well.
Exactly. Know what you're good at and do it, and do it well, and that'll help any team. Everybody needs to play defense, of course, but there's other parts of the game. Not every, like as they always say, there's whatever number of shots in a game. It's not an equal opportunity system. Everybody doesn't get the same number of shots. You want the people who are the better shooters shooting most of the shots.
Exactly.
Yeah,
exactly.
It's as simple as that.
Exactly.
So, you know, but as I said, some of the great kids that I coached really took that to heart. You know, another one that you know that I coached, and you may not even know that I coached him, and he's a good story, and that's Reed Kenyon.
Oh, okay.
Now, of course,
no idea.
No, he's a top official. And the reason I mention him is because when Reed played in grade 11, he seldom played, and he was very frustrated. And there were times where I sat with him and tried to explain to him that what he had to do and that his turn would come and all that. And I guess he listened, because in that summer between grade 11 and grade 12, he worked his butt off. He worked his butt off. I had kids coming to my house and seeing me, Mr. Wedlake, have you seen Reed play? Have you seen Reed play? He's so much better and all this. And he was all conference in his grade 12 year, going from somebody that seldom played in grade 11.
So this is exactly what I'm talking about when I started our conversation. And I said, I had no idea about your past. I wouldn't, again, we can assume people played, but I would have never assumed that Reed was a basketball player. I just assumed, hey, he's a ref. He's out here reffing, and that's what he does. And I never would have thought that. He
attacked the hoop really well. He was strong, and his left hand. You know who else I coached? There was another referee, is Cam Moskal.
Really?
Yeah, he played just before Reed, and he was a good player. Yeah. Wow. And so was his brother, Chris, his older brother, Chris.
These are all KE people?
Sure.
Wow.
And then I always say to them, they were smarter. They saw coaching wasn't that good because you didn't make any money. You go to referee.
So they got to the reffing, yeah.
They were smarter than I was.
You get paid And you're in absolute control of everything. Coaching, you coach your team, that's fine, but you can control the fans, you can control the scorers table, the teams, the players, the coaches, the managers, everyone. So
right.
That says a lot about them, I guess. Not
I give them credit. They who inspired them in turn was Wes Grimble.
Yes,
Wes was at Morse Place, which was the adjacent junior high, just down the street from where Kildonan-East is. And he got to know them, and he inspired them and got them into officiating. So good for Wes.
Got it. That makes sense. So Ross, I kind of wanted to, change pace here. And I wanted to talk about the Basketball Manitoba Hall of Fame. So obviously you're a massive part of that, both as a figurehead, but also actively, doing things to build the Hall of Fame, the literal Hall of Fame, collecting memorabilia and talking with people. Obviously, the awards ceremony, I know you're a big part of that as well. But can you tell us why the Hall is so important to you?
It's really become a very big part of my life, for sure. I think one of the reasons is because, as you said earlier, we're passionate about basketball. Mm-hmm. And the thing that I like most about it now is that there's a place now in Manitoba that is preserving the history, the heritage of this game of basketball. And mm-hmm. we all know that so much stuff that is out there that if there isn't a place for it, it's lost.
Yes.
It gets thrown out. Who knows what happens to it? Mm-hmm. This stuff needs to be preserved. We need to have a record so that kids can go there and see, and how carefully they look or not, but see that the game didn't start when they played.
Yes.
The game's been going for a long time. And there's a lot of people who did a lot of work to build the game into what it is today. And we are still, the Manitoba Basketball Hall of Fame and Museum is still unique in Canada. Like, we are the only province that has a permanent physical site dedicated specifically to the sport of basketball. Mm-hmm. Like many provinces, like Manitoba, we have one too, have a sports Hall of Fame.
Yes.
Where there are numerous sports displayed and people are recognized. And we have ours, of course, in the main floor of the Sport Manitoba building. But we are the only province that has a site specifically dedicated to basketball and basketball only. Mm-hmm. And we're proud of that. Mm-hmm. Let's be honest, it wouldn't have happened without the support of the University of Winnipeg in terms of them dedicating that space to us. So we're very, very grateful to the University of Winnipeg. We think and hope that they believe that it's in their interest to have it there too, because we get many visitors. We have a visitor counter. We haven't had one visitor for the last 18 months other than me. But we get lots of visitors and lots of great comments. And now I get people, and I'm sure I've brought a lot of it into the office, people will donate things.
Yes.
To the Hall of Fame and Museum. And it's great because they know that that's the place. Like a name I'll throw out, we just lost within this last year, a gentleman by the name of Ross Zilke, who was the manager of the University of Manitoba Bisons during the 1970s. And he was a great guy. And he died, and his family had a fair bit of stuff that he had basketball-wise. Mm-hmm. And they, of course, didn't want it because it really didn't mean much to them. And I ended up acquiring it through the lawyer who was dealing with the estate. Mm-hmm. And some really good stuff that probably, as I said, would have ended up being thrown out.
Yes. Yes.
And it's not. We have it, and that's where it should be. So I'm really proud of the place. We've put a lot of I've put a lot of time and effort. It's become a big part of my life. And that's one reason why, and I think you know this, we started about 2 years ago, an endowment fund through the Winnipeg Foundation, where we did some fundraising to create this endowment fund. And our goal at that originally was maybe $50,000, $60,000. We kept passing that, and now we've passed the $100,000 goal. So I've stopped. And not because we don't want any more, but because we will now get a grant every year from the Winnipeg Foundation based on the interest of the money that they have and all that financial stuff that they do that will be basically cover operating funds. And I always say that the reason it makes me feel good is because when I'm gone, I want this thing to continue. And we know that sometimes things don't continue because of finances. People, there isn't enough money. There will always be money now for operating funds. So I'm hoping that this endowment fund that I worked very hard, and I have to congratulate the many people who contributed to this. I was pleasantly surprised that we were able to break the 100,000. It's at $105,776 or something like that. I don't know, but it was great. And so we're very happy about that. And it's going to continue. And I'm there at least once a week now, even though I'm the only one to see it. And I've got stuff in my other room right here that I'm working on, that trying to get up. And it's to me, it's a showcase of basketball in the province of Manitoba. When we had the Basketball Manitoba had all the executive directors from all the provinces here, it's got to be about 4 years ago now, from all across Canada, we made the point of taking them there. And they were all in awe of this thing. Of
course.
Because none of them, of course, have anything like that.
Yeah.
And it's great, you know, I mean, and I have to say, I'll put a little dig in here, that one reason it's good is because our local universities, both Winnipeg and Manitoba and Brandon, but Winnipeg and Brandon, of course, are much younger, but the universities haven't done a good job of preserving their sport heritage. They haven't. And anytime I've contacted them to try to find out something, like, we know more than they know.
Yeah.
You know, and that's why another reason we need this, because nobody else is doing it.
Yeah. Well, you said so many great things. And again, I did not know about the fund, and I guess I just want to say congratulations. That's amazing. For me, I know the younger kids won't appreciate it as much, but I think some of the athletes that have just graduated university or are in their later years or are still connected to the game, I think they really appreciate that, because as you get older, you really start to appreciate legacy. However, that said, kids, when they see something like that, like you said at the beginning, they understand that the game was there before them. And I think that is a super important thing to make note of, because it allows you to, I guess, have some like scaffolding, like you have a base to stand on, you know what I mean? And when you start to achieve certain things in your career, you understand how special they are. So when you see these awards that, Basketball Manitoba gives out at their awards, they're typically named after people, and you understand that there's a legacy and a story there. So I think the hall is amazing. And I guess I bet you never thought that you'd be a museum curator at any point in your life, but yet here you are. Essentially, it is a museum. It's a basketball museum, and you're the one who's again, the curator of that. And I know also, just so people who don't know, you had mentioned it is at the University of Winnipeg. And then also on your website, there's tons of, digitized stuff that I know Basketball Manitoba has digitized for the Manitoba Basketball Hall of Fame as well. So all these, these physical items, some of them are available online as well to view. So for me, I'm a big history guy. I love it. I know whenever you'd come into the office and you'd have something, I'd say, let me look at that. And it's just something simple. I mean, sometimes it was just like a newspaper thing or an old program, but I just loved them. And so I know there's other people out there. So I did want to. One of
the interesting things to me now is I'll get people who played basketball bringing their children or grandchildren to show them things in there. And that's neat too, that, I'm not, like I said, I may look old now, but once I was young and once I was pretty good.
Exactly. You can always tell. Show you, check it out. This was me before.
Yeah.
So Ross, I mean, we're getting close to the end here. I know I asked you about your most memorable basketball or your coaching experience story, and you told a little bit of a tearjerker. Do you have you have so many stories, I'm sure, but outside of that one, and this could be your own personal story of you playing or something on the road, it doesn't even have to be necessarily a basketball situation, but do you just have a most memorable basketball story that you find yourself telling over and over again?
That's a good question. As a player, just two things. The thing I remember most is going from in university in 5 years from being probably the worst team in Canada to
Yeah.
almost the best team. And
No
what a
kidding.
journey that was. So
Mhm.
I remember, and all the experiences that went along with it. One thing that always comes to mind when I think of playing is in 1972, St. Andrews, after winning the national senior championships that we
Mhm.
talked about earlier, we were invited to go to Cuba.
Okay.
Now, in those days, very few people went to Cuba.
Oh, yeah.
It wasn't the tourist hotspot that it is today.
Mhm.
And we were invited to go, and we went. And what a great opportunity it was. And what I remember playing there, it was so interesting that we played in the first game was in Havana in the big stadium they had, and the game was going on, and I don't remember what point of the game, but in the game, and sometime during the game, Fidel Castro came in.
Oh, wow.
He entered the arena, and the game just stopped,
Wow.
and the people just celebrated. They were
Wow.
just like ecstatic, so happy, and they jumped and hugged and danced, and we just kind of stood there, and we didn't know what to do and how to react.
Yeah.
It was just so unique
Yeah.
for us to see this, and that lasted about maybe 5 minutes, and then he sat down and they started the game again.
Wow.
It was interesting. And then we played in a place called Camagüey, which, if you look on the map of Cuba, is a smaller town in a fairly small gym that really wasn't that good, to be honest. It was semi-covered. But what I remember there most, and it was very emotional, is they always play the national anthems before any international competition. And they played a recording they had of "O Canada," which was the worst recording you could ever, either it was a tape or a record that was so scratchy, and yet it was really memorable to be standing there representing your country
Yeah.
in a place like that, and to hear this scratchy recording. I'll never forget that too. You know what I mean? It was,
Wow.
pretty powerful when you, as I said, we may have thought we were St. Andrews, but when we went there, we were Canada.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's how they advertised us, and we were representing our country. So those kinds of things stand up too. But again, the only other thing I'll add, and then I'll shut up, is the most important thing about my playing was the teammates.
Yeah,
for
sure.
We just had a golf thing about 2 weeks ago, and some guys flew in for it, as a matter of fact, which in this day and age, with the COVID and all that, shows a lot.
Absolutely.
But they want to come, and they were here, and it was like old times again.
Wow. Wow. Well, I'm not going to let you go yet, because we can't have you stopping yet, because I have another question.
Okay.
And you're a great storyteller. So I'm actually looking now for your funniest basketball story. So something that I know, the salt tablets, for me, that was hilarious. You told obviously some funny jokes, but what stands out? Something that's funny that you want to tell people. You're around the table, maybe you're reminiscing at this golf tournament. And you're like, hey, you bring up a funny situation that took place.
Well, I'll just tell you two, if I can.
Mm-hmm.
One, when I was in university, we had a manager of the Bison basketball team who was unlike any other manager they've ever had. They would love to have. His name is John Brown. He's still my best friend.
Should I know? The name sounds familiar.
I don't know. He doesn't live here anymore.
So I wouldn't know.
He's got lots of money. He lives in Florida. And Jaime Fox and I go there when I'm done there.
This is probably why I've heard of him, because
we go there to help him spend it. But
yeah, okay.
He was the manager. And in our last conference game, before the playoffs in my last year, Jack Lewis dressed him. And it was kind of like the Rudy. You've seen Rudy?
Yes, Rudy, of course.
It was kind of like that. And he was a decent player, but not good. But he dressed him, and he was pretty heavy. So the uniform was tight, to say the least. But we were playing the University of Winnipeg, as a matter of fact, in our last conference game. And Lewis put him in with about maybe I don't know, a minute or 2 minutes, I don't know, left.
Yeah.
And he made a hoop. He got a hoop.
He scored. Wow.
Yes.
So you guys must have went crazy.
We were on the like the guys that were on the bench, me included. We just had the greatest time.
Of course.
Watching this, and it was so much fun to watch. And next time you see Vic Pruden, ask him about that, because he thinks it was awful.
Wow. Wow, Rudy.
Well, the only other one I'll tell you.
Oh yeah, you said you had two. Yeah.
To this is more of a family thing, because you mentioned that I coached Adam.
Yes.
Adam is my nephew.
Yes.
In high school, and in grade 11, when Adam, as you know, Adam has a twin brother named Sean.
Yes.
And in grade 11, when they both tried out for the team, in a very difficult decision, I kept Adam on the team and cut Sean. Now, I had talked to my brother about this at length, and he was supportive of it 100%. He knew that he had no trouble with it and all that.
Yep.
I made the mistake, though, of not talking to my mother,
their
grandmother.
Oh, no.
And she was, to say the least, a little unhappy that I had kept Adam and cut Sean.
You don't treat family like that. It's family, right? Family business.
How could you? So that was not funny at the time, but looking back at it, I will add to that story, though, and this is Sean's credit. He tried out, he was manager in grade 11. He stayed on, and he tried out in grade 12 and made the team.
But was this because
no
family drama?
No, he was better, and there was a place for him. You know, he worked hard and all that, but he did make the team in grade 12. So good for him.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Well, Ross, you've I knew this already. Obviously, it was going to be a bunch of awesome stories that I'd be laughing and smiling at the entire time, and that turned out to be true. So I'm happy to say that I hope everyone who's listening enjoys your stories as much as I do, because like I said, every time, you know, you come in the office or I see you, there's always a story, and I appreciate that. I'm a history guy. I'm a legacy guy. And obviously you are as well. I wish I had the ability to remember stories, because I'm terrible at that. So I think that's why I appreciate storytellers so much, because I am terrible at it. But before we sign off, I want to ask one last question. Typically, you know, I ask this question focused on coaches, so I will ask it that way anyways. However, feel free to take it wherever you want. So the actual question I wrote out is what are 3 pieces of advice you would give to young coaches who are just kind of starting out? And I think you're a great person to give that advice, but if you want to give that advice and maybe any other advice you'd like to share with people who are listening, or maybe people who aren't coaches, maybe they're players, maybe they're referees, maybe they're just basketball junkies, whatever makes you feel better. I'll let you decide.
Okay. I've been asked that before, and I always answer it the same way. The summer that I played on Canada's national basketball team with Jack Donnie, who coached, we were training and playing in New York City for a while. Mm-hmm. And he had good friends in that area, of course. And he knew that some of us, like me, were a little older and were going to be coaching. And he arranged for us to have a gathering with a guy by the name of Roy Rubin. Now, you don't know that name, but he was just starting that year as the coach of the Philadelphia 76ers. Mm-hmm. And he was a pro coach, and he was well known as a college coach in that area too. So I remember going to this meeting. There was about maybe 4 or 5 of us that he took to see Roy Rubin. And I had my notepad and all that, and I was ready to write down a million things that he was going to tell me to make me a better coach. And he said, okay, I'm just going to tell you one thing, and then you can ask me questions. And that, okay. And the one thing he told us, I'll never forget it. He said, pick good kids and teach them how to play. Mm. That's all he said. And then we asked him questions. And there's a lot of merit to that. You know what I mean? Especially at a high school level. You know, if you're working with good people, the job is going to be a lot more fun and a lot more enjoyable for you. Mm-hmm. Pick good kids and teach them how to play basketball. Mm-hmm. Simple as that. And I've always remembered that. And, you know, and the thing I remember too, I think Roy Rubin lasted about 30 games and he was fired. So, I don't know.
So is that good advice or not?
I don't know. I remember too, he said that he was looking forward to the year because we asked him, how's your team going to be and all that. And I won't tell you the name of the guy, but he said it was going to be okay. But he said the biggest problem is my best player is an alcoholic.
Well, I mean, maybe that's why he got fired.
Maybe that's why he got fired. I don't know.
He did not pick. I mean, I guess at the pros, you don't necessarily get to pick.
No, you don't
team,
get to pick.
Yeah.
But I think that's decent advice for a young coach. And I think the other advice I would give coaches is be organized. Like, plan every practice. Have a written practice plan. And don't convince yourself, it's all in my head, and I'm just going to go out there and I'm going to, do whatever I think needs to happen. No, you got to get organized. You got to have a plan. You got to know, like, okay, if we've got 2 weeks to practice before we're going to play, like, what do we need to do in those 2 weeks to prepare ourselves so that we don't get to that first game and then look like a bunch of jackasses because nobody knows what's happening.
Yeah.
And you got to be organized. You got to plan. And like I can honestly say I still have them. Every practice plan that I ever had. And
really,
I have them. And I'm not saying they're wonderful, but I think too, I used to go into the gym. I would open the binder, put it on the table at the scorer's table. The managers would have the other things set up. And if the kids wanted to come and look at it, they could. A lot of them didn't understand it because it was written in my lingo, and some of them, to be honest, I didn't really care. But I think the message was very clear to them. The message was, this is important what we're doing here.
Yes.
Like, I just didn't walk in this gym and what are we going to do today? Or let's think of something. This is important because I think the most important thing we can get the kids to do is give their best and play hard and compete. And if you get kids who want to compete and run the floor hard and get after loose balls and work defensively and all that, you'll be competitive.
Yeah.
And then you can work on the other things about all that kind of stuff. But we want kids to take this game seriously.
Absolutely.
And I think we have to model that. And I think the message was clear that I show up here prepared every day.
Yeah.
And this is what we're going to do. And we know what we're going to do, and we're going to work hard at it. And we're going to give our best here. And our only goal should be to get better every day. At the end of this practice, we can say, I'm a little bit better than I was at the start.
Yeah.
That's really the only goal. And every day we keep getting a little bit better. Yeah. And that's simple, because I know we get hung up on a lot of the technical stuff. And I don't know. I'm not saying you don't have to know all that stuff, but you got to get kids playing hard first. You got to get kids competing. Because if I learned one thing about basketball, that if you don't compete physically in the game first, it doesn't matter what else you're doing.
True. Yep.
You can have the best offense and defense and all this kind of stuff, whatever, but you got to compete physically. I remember when I worked with my brother at the University of Winnipeg, we'd talk and I'd argue because that was what I thought I should do. Like, I shouldn't just accept everything. And when we played Brandon, Brandon had a lot of great teams in those days with a lot of great athletes. And my brother would say, okay, we want to do this and we want to do that. And he'd have all this stuff. And he used to bug him because I always say to him, okay, that's good. But if we don't compete physically, that doesn't matter.
Yes.
We have to because they're such great athletes. Yeah. That if we don't compete physically, you can have all the crap you want.
Exactly.
So to me, that's what I would say to you. I don't care what level you're coaching. Get kids to work hard at it, be organized, get them playing hard. And again, pick good kids and teach them how to play.
Well, I mean, that's a great way to wrap up this conversation. I enjoyed the hell out of it. Like I was saying earlier, I hope you did as well. And I hope people who are listening right now enjoyed it as well. Ross, thank you. Don't really have much else to say, just thank you.
Before we leave, I'd like to say thank you to you for all the work you do in promoting basketball all over, because that's important, especially through this media that I don't understand.
Well, now that you're on the podcast, we're gonna have to get
there you go. Now I put that in my resume.
Well, yeah, but now you have to start becoming a listener.
That's right. But I sincerely do thank you for the work you do in promoting basketball, because that's how we're connecting to the younger players today.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, the things have changed. The game is different.
Yep.
And people get a lot of their information through things like this. And I really congratulate you and thank you for the work you do.
Well, I appreciate just being part of it all. So I think we're both very grateful and appreciative of each other and the community. And there is a great community here in basketball. So this podcast is a big part of that. We want it to be a big part of that, just like the Hall of Fame and all the other little things. So thank you, Ross. On that note, we'll say goodbye.
Okay, bye.
Okay,
thanks, Darcy.
Take care. Thanks for listening to today's episode. Please like, subscribe, follow, and share this series, and reach out to us with your comments on the show. Thanks again for joining us.